The dining room at Briarfield gleamed with candlelight that evening. Crystal catching flame, silver polished to mirrors. 8 guests gathered around mahogany to celebrate Griffin Ashcombe's appointment as Chancellor of the Duchy. Lady Eloise Harcourt rose from her chair, slender and composed in pearl silk, and lifted her glass toward the man she would marry in 3 months. Across the room, the woman called Sophie Marsh stood at the sideboard refilling water jugs, gray wool dress buttoned to her throat, and watched the Duke's hand close around the stem of his wine glass. His fingers trembled. Not much, a flutter against crystal, barely visible in candlelight. But she had seen that tremor before. 2 years ago. In a different hand, at a different table. The hand had been her father's. She set down the water jug with enough force that the housekeeper glanced her way. 3 feet of carpet separated her from the Duke's chair. She crossed it, bent to his ear, whispered 6 words that would dismantle every certainty in his house. "Your Grace, do not drink. That wine is poisoned." Griffin turned his head. The companion was close enough that he could see the pulse beating in her throat, the white edge around her lips. Her eyes were not the eyes of a woman who served in silence. They were frightened and furious, and something else he could not name. "And how would a lady's companion know that?" he asked, voice low enough that the guests did not hear. "Because I watched my father die of the same thing," she said. "And the woman who poured his wine is sitting at your table." She straightened and walked back to the sideboard. Griffin looked across the room. Mrs. Dorothea Wynne, Eloise's widowed aunt and chaperone, sat 3 chairs down. She lifted her own glass, drank, and smiled at Eloise. The conversation continued. Lord Pemberton was describing the Reform Bill debates. Lady Harcourt laughed at something Sir Wycliffe said. The evening flowed around Griffin like water around stone. He set down his glass. Not because he believed the companion. Because her eyes had frightened him, and he did not understand why. The morning after the dinner, Dorothea Wynne descended to the housekeeper's sitting room and closed the door behind her. Mrs. Caldwell looked up from her household ledger. "Mrs. Wynne, how may I assist you?" Dorothea sat, arranging her skirts with the precision of a woman who had spent 52 years navigating other people's houses. "I wish to speak with you about Miss Marsh, the new companion. Is there a concern?" "She has been behaving oddly," Dorothea said. Her voice carried the exact measure of reluctance, enough to suggest she disliked bringing the matter forward, not enough to suggest she doubted her own observation. Last evening during dinner, she approached His Grace and whispered something to him. He appeared unsettled, and this morning I found her standing outside my guest chamber. When I asked if she needed assistance, she startled and hurried away without answering. Mrs. Caldwell frowned. "That is unlike her. Miss Marsh has been entirely proper since her arrival." "I agree, which is why I mention it." Dorothea leaned forward slightly. "I wonder if she might be unwell. Overwrought, perhaps. Lady Eloise has been occupied with wedding preparations. Miss Marsh may feel the strain of increased duties." "I will speak with her," Mrs. Caldwell said. "Gently, I hope. The poor girl may simply need rest." Dorothea rose. "Thank you for your attention to this." She left the housekeeper's room and climbed the stairs to the guest wing, where her traveling case sat beneath a window, locked and undisturbed. Griffin summoned the companion to the morning room at 10 o'clock. She entered through the service door, gray dress freshly pressed, hands folded at her waist. In daylight, he could see her more clearly than he had by candlelight. 26, perhaps. Dark hair pulled back severely. A face that would have been handsome if it were not so carefully blank. "You wished to see me, Your Grace?" "I did." Griffin stood by the window, arms crossed. Last evening you made a claim about my wine. I would like you to explain it. She met his eyes without flinching. I told you the wine was poisoned. Yes, and I am asking how a lady's companion would possess such knowledge. I watched my father die of the same thing, she said. The symptoms are identical. Griffin studied her. She did not look away. Describe them. Trembling in the hands, numbness in the extremities, progressive pallor over the course of months. My father declined for 4 months before his heart failed. You have been experiencing tremors for at least 3 months, possibly longer. The pattern is the same. Many conditions cause tremors, Griffin said. Yes, Your Grace. But not many conditions also explain why the woman who was a guest in my father's house the winter he died is now pouring wine in yours. The words landed like stones in still water. Griffin uncrossed his arms. What are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you what I saw. Mrs. Dorothea Wynne was a guest at my father's estate in the winter of 1824. He fell ill in March. She left in June. He died in July. Now she sits at your table, and you are showing the same symptoms he showed before his physicians called it heart failure and stopped looking. Griffin walked to his desk and sat. Your father's name? She hesitated. The blankness in her face cracked for the first time. Baron Everard Collier, of Ashwick? Collier. Griffin frowned. The Chancery case. Land transfers. The case collapsed after the Baron's death. It collapsed because he died before he could testify. Griffin leaned back in his chair. You are suggesting that Mrs. Wynne poisoned your father to prevent his testimony in a legal matter, and is now poisoning me for what reason? You were appointed Chancellor of the Duchy 8 months ago, she said. You have the authority to reopen dormant Chancery cases. If you reviewed the Collier file, the fraud would resurface. Mrs. Wynne cannot allow that. This is an extraordinary accusation. She nodded. Yes. Based on a similarity in symptoms and the coincidence of Mrs. Wynne's presence in 2 households. It is not coincidence, she said, her voice sharpened. I sat beside my father's bed for 4 months. I watched his hands shake. I watched him lose feeling in his fingers. I watched the color leave his face. When I saw your hand tremble last evening, I recognized it. I know what I am looking at, Your Grace. I did not know 2 years ago. I know now. Griffin studied her. The blankness had not returned. What he saw instead was something raw and uncontained. Grief, perhaps, or fury, or both. What is your name? He asked. Sophie Marsh. Your real name. She went still. That is my name, Your Grace. You hesitated before you told me your father's title. A companion does not hesitate when naming her previous employer. You hesitated because you are not accustomed to calling him Baron Collier. You are accustomed to calling him something else. She said nothing. Leave me, Griffin said. I will consider what you have told me. She curtsied and walked to the service door. As she reached it, Griffin spoke again. Miss Marsh, I appreciate your concern. But in future, if you have observations about my health, bring them to my physician, not to me at dinner. She turned. Your physician has been treating you for 3 months, Your Grace. He has not asked what you drink before the symptoms appear. I did. She left. Griffin sat alone in the morning room, staring at the closed door. That night, when the wine was poured, he did not drink it. 4 days later, Griffin rode out with his groom to inspect the northern boundary of the estate. The morning was cold, the ground hard beneath the horses' hooves. They had ridden 2 miles when Griffin felt his hands weaken. not tremble, weaken. His fingers lost their grip on the reins. The leather slipped through his hands. He grabbed for the pommel and missed. The groom caught his arm. "Your Grace." Griffin steadied himself against the horse's neck. His hands felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else. The groom dismounted and helped him down. They walked the horses back to the stable in silence. Griffin climbed the steps to the house and went directly to his study, closing the door behind him. He sat at his desk and stared at his hands. They looked the same as they always had. Strong, capable, unmarked. But when he tried to make a fist, the fingers moved slowly, as though pushing through water. An hour later, there was a knock at the study door. Griffin did not answer. The knock came again. Then the door opened, and the companion entered without permission. "I did not give you leave to enter," Griffin said. "No, Your Grace." She crossed the room and placed 2 items on his desk. The first was a death certificate. The second was a folded sheaf of papers covered in a physician's handwriting. "The death certificate is my father's. The papers are the symptom notes from the Ashwick physician who attended him during his final months. I have also included the notes from your own physician's recent observations, which I obtained from Dr. Hartwell this morning." Griffin looked at the documents. "You went to my physician?" "I told him I was organizing your household records. He provided the notes without question." Griffin opened the Ashwick physician's notes. The handwriting was cramped and precise. March 15th, 1824. Tremor in right hand. Patient reports numbness in fingertips. April 3rd, tremor worsening. Pallor noted. May 12th. Patient unable to hold pen. Progressive weakness in extremities. June 20th. Marked decline. Cardiac symptoms evident. He opened his own physician's notes. October 18th, 1826. Intermittent tremor in hands. Patient attributes to fatigue. November 2nd. Tremor persists. Patient reports occasional numbness. December 10th. Pallor noted. Patient appears unwell. The progression was identical. The timeline was identical. The outcome, unless interrupted, would be identical. Griffin looked up. The companion stood on the other side of the desk, hands folded, face blank again. "You requested a private audience yesterday," Griffin said. "I refused. So you left this on my desk instead." She nodded. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you were going to die, Your Grace. And I could not watch that happen a second time without speaking." Griffin gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She sat. "Tell me your real name," Griffin said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Seraphine Collier." The name settled between them like a stone. "Baron Collier's daughter," Griffin said. She confirmed it. "Yes." "You entered this household under a false name." "I entered this household because I had no other choice," Seraphine said. "After my father died, the estate was seized by creditors. The land transfers he intended to testify against left the barony encumbered with debts that were not his. I was left with nothing. No fortune, no home, a name attached to financial disgrace. I took a position as a companion because it was the only position available to a woman with no references and no connections. Why this household? Because it was far from Ashwick. And because no one in your circle had met Baron Collier's daughter." Griffin leaned back in his chair. "You have been here 6 months." She agreed. "Yes." "Performing a role, hiding behind a false name." She met his gaze. "Yes." "And now you expect me to believe that the woman who has been deceiving me for 6 months is telling me the truth about a murder." Seraphine's hands tightened in her lap. I expect you to look at those documents and decide whether you care more about my deception or the fact that you have been dying for 3 months. Griffin looked at the death certificate. Baron Everard Collier. Died July 14th, 1824. Cause of death, cardiac failure. Your father's death was ruled natural, Griffin said. His death was ruled natural because no one in that house knew what they were looking at, Seraphine said. I know now. The woman who was a guest in my father's house the winter he died is sitting in your guest wing. The symptoms that killed him are the same symptoms I have watched in you after Mrs. Wynne touches your decanter. If you dismiss this as coincidence, you will be dead by spring. Griffin set down the death certificate. What do you want from me? I want you to investigate. Review the Collier Chancery file. Examine the timeline of Mrs. Wynne's visits. Compare the medical records, and stop drinking the wine. I have not touched the wine since the night you warned me. Then you are still alive because of that, Seraphine said. Do not waste it by refusing to see what is in front of you. Griffin studied her. The blankness was gone entirely now. What remained was sharp and uncompromising, and nothing like the woman who had served water at his table for 6 months. If I investigate, Griffin said, and if your claims prove accurate, the consequences will be considerable. For Mrs. Wynne, for Lady Eloise, for you. I am aware. And you are willing to accept those consequences. I am willing to accept anything except watching you die the way my father died, Seraphine said. In silence, while the person responsible pours wine and smiles. Griffin stood. Very well. I will review the Chancery file. You will provide me with any additional information about your father's illness and Mrs. Wynne's presence in your household. We will proceed carefully. If you are correct, we will act. If you are mistaken, you will leave this house and never return. Agreed. One more thing, Miss Collier. Griffin walked around the desk and stopped in front of her chair. If you lie to me again about anything, this ends. Do you understand? She held his gaze. Yes, Your Grace. Then go. She stood and walked to the door. As she reached it, Griffin spoke again. Miss Collier. She turned. Thank you, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded and left. Griffin sat alone in his study, staring at the death certificate. Baron Everard Collier. Died July 14th, 1824. The date was 2 years and 5 months ago. The method, if Seraphine was correct, was the same method being used on him now. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and removed the Chancery file marked Collier versus Wynne Estate. Land transfers, 1823 to 1824. He had not looked at it since his appointment. The case had collapsed after the Baron's death. There had been no reason to reopen it. Until now. Seraphine began her investigation the next morning. She started with the household records, guest logs, correspondence, dates of arrival and departure. Mrs. Wynne had visited the Collier estate twice in the winter of 1824. The first visit had been brief, 3 days in January. The second had been longer, nearly 2 months, from late February through April. Her father had fallen ill in March. She cross-referenced the dates with her own memories. Mrs. Wynne had been present at dinner the night her father first complained of numbness in his hands. She had been present the morning he dropped his teacup. She had been present, always present, hovering at the edges of rooms, pouring wine, offering concern. Seraphine climbed the stairs to the guest wing and stopped outside Mrs. Wynne's chamber. The door was closed. She knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. She returned to the servants' corridor and found the housekeeper's spare key ring hanging on its hook. She took the ring and climbed the stairs again. The third key opened Mrs. Wynne's door, The room was neat, impersonal, the bed made with military precision. Seraphine crossed to the wardrobe and opened it. Dresses, shawls, nothing unusual. She knelt and checked beneath the bed. Nothing. She turned to the writing desk by the window. The desk drawers were locked. Seraphine used the smallest key on the housekeeper's ring. The lock clicked open. Inside the drawer was a leather travel case. She lifted it onto the desk and opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, neatly bundled with ribbon. She untied the first bundle and began reading. The correspondence was between Mrs. Wynne and a London solicitor named Mr. Graves. Most of the letters concerned financial matters, rents, investments, estate management. But halfway through the bundle, Seraphine found a letter dated May 1824. The Collier matter has been resolved. The Baron's testimony will not proceed. I trust this concludes our business regarding the land transfers. Seraphine stared at the word, resolved. Her father's name, the date, 1 month before he died. She folded the letter and placed it in her pocket. Then she returned the travel case to the drawer, locked it, and left the room. As she stepped into the corridor, Mrs. Wynne appeared at the top of the stairs. "Miss Marsh," she said. Her voice was calm, pleasant, exactly as it always was. "May I ask what you were doing in my chamber?" Seraphine's hand tightened on the key ring. "I was looking for you, Mrs. Wynne. The housekeeper asked me to inquire whether you required fresh linens." "I see." Mrs. Wynne walked forward until she stood directly in front of Seraphine. "And did the housekeeper also provide you with her keys?" Seraphine said nothing. "I thought not." Mrs. Wynne held out her hand. "The keys, please." Seraphine placed the key ring in her palm. "You have been in my room," Mrs. Wynne said. "You have gone through my belongings. That is grounds for immediate dismissal. I could speak to Lady Eloise now, and you would be gone by evening." "Then speak to her." Mrs. Wynne tilted her head slightly. "Or you could leave quietly. Pack your things, depart before dinner. No scandal, no questions. Simply gone." Seraphine looked at the woman who had killed her father. Calm, composed, offering her an escape as though she were doing her a kindness. She refused. No. She walked past Mrs. Wynne, down the stairs, and directly to the Duke's study. She knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Griffin looked up from the chancery file spread across his desk. "Miss Collier, I did not—" She placed the letter on top of the file. Griffin picked it up and read it. His expression did not change, but his hand tightened on the paper. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "In Mrs. Wynne's travel case, in her guest chamber." "She discovered you there?" She confirmed it. "Yes." "And?" "She offered me a choice. Leave quietly or face dismissal. I chose neither." Griffin set down the letter. "She will go to Lady Eloise." "I know. Eloise will believe her." "Probably." Griffin stood and walked to the window. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "The chancery file confirms what you told me. The land transfers were fraudulent. Your father was the primary witness. If he had testified, the Wynne estate would have been liable for £8,000 in restitution. He died before the case went to trial. The case collapsed. And now you have the authority to reopen it," Seraphine said. He turned to face her. "Yes. Which is why she is poisoning you." Griffin turned. "If your accusation becomes public, and if it proves false, you will be prosecuted for slander. If it proves true, you will be the woman who destroyed Lady Eloise's aunt and humiliated her household. Either outcome ends your life as you know it." "My life as I know it ended 2 years ago," Seraphine said. I have been living in the wreckage since. I am not afraid of more wreckage. Griffin crossed the room and stopped in front of her. Why are you doing this? Because I failed to save my father, Seraphine said. I sat beside him for 4 months and watched him die, and I did not know what I was watching. I know now, and I will not let the same silence kill you. Griffin looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, We will need proof. The letter is suggestive, but not conclusive. We need medical testimony. We need the Ashwick physician's full records. And we need someone willing to testify that Mrs. Wynne had motive and opportunity. I will testify. You are the accuser. Your testimony will be suspect. Then find someone else. There is no one else, Griffin said. You are the only person who witnessed both deaths. Seraphine met his eyes. Then my testimony will have to be enough. Griffin nodded slowly. Very well. I will send for the Ashwick physician's records. You will prepare a written account of your father's illness and Mrs. Wynne's presence in your household. We will present the evidence to Sir Wycliffe Graves, the magistrate. He will decide whether an inquest is warranted. And until then, you stay in this house. You do not leave. You do not speak to Mrs. Wynne. You do not give her any reason to act. She has already acted, Seraphine said. She knows I was in her room. She knows I found something. She will not wait. Then neither will we. Seraphine turned to leave. As she reached the door, Griffin spoke again. Miss Collier, wait. She stopped. He crossed the room and stood in front of her. Then he took her wrist, gently, carefully, and pressed 2 fingers to the inside of her wrist, just below her palm. What are you doing? She asked. What you did to me, Griffin said. The morning after the dinner, you took my wrist and counted my pulse. She nodded. Yeah? Why? Because your resting pulse was elevated. 92. It should have been 70. Griffin released her wrist. And now? Now it is 80. Still elevated, but better than it was. Because I stopped drinking the wine. She agreed. Yes. Griffin looked at her. You saved my life, Miss Collier. I dismissed you because of a gray dress. I did not listen because servants do not advise dukes. I was wrong. Seraphine said nothing. She looked at him. And for the first time since she had entered his household, she did not look away. I will not dismiss you again, Griffin said. She nodded. Then she left. Griffin stood alone in his study, staring at the letter from the London solicitor. The Collier matter has been resolved. The word resolved beside the name of a dead man. He sat at his desk and began drafting a letter to Sir Wycliffe Graves. That evening, Mrs. Wynne requested a private meeting with the Duke. Griffin received her in the drawing room. She entered wearing black silk, her face composed, her hands folded at her waist. Your Grace, thank you for seeing me. Mrs. Wynne, please sit. She sat. Griffin remained standing. I wish to speak with you about Miss Marsh, Mrs. Wynne said. I am concerned that she may be unwell. In what way? She has been behaving erratically. This morning I found her in my guest chamber, going through my belongings. When I asked what she was doing, she became defensive and refused to answer. I fear she may be suffering from some form of nervous distress. Griffin walked to the window and looked out at the darkening garden. Miss Marsh described her father's symptoms to me in considerable detail. Tremors, numbness, progressive pallor. She matched those symptoms to my own recent health complaints before I told her what they were. She then provided me with medical records from the Ashwick physician who attended her father, which I have since verified. The progression is identical. Mrs. Wynne's expression did not change. I was not aware that Miss Marsh had access to your medical records, Your Grace. She obtained them. By what means? That is not your concern. Mrs. Wynne folded her hands more tightly. Your Grace, I must tell you that Miss Marsh is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Seraphine Collier. She is Baron Collier's daughter. She entered your household under a false name. I know, Griffin said. Mrs. Wynne went still. Miss Collier informed me of her true identity yesterday, Griffin continued. She also informed me that you were a guest in the Collier household during her father's final illness, that you were present at his table, that the symptoms he exhibited before his death are identical to the symptoms I have been experiencing since October. Baron Collier died of heart failure, Mrs. Wynne said. It was a tragedy, but it was a natural death. His physicians confirmed it. His physicians confirmed cardiac failure. They did not investigate the cause. Because there was no cause to investigate. Griffin turned from the window. Miss Collier believes otherwise. She believes her father was poisoned. She believes the same method is being used on me. And she believes you are responsible. Mrs. Wynne stood. Your Grace, this is a monstrous accusation. Miss Collier is a woman who has lost everything. Her father, her home, her reputation. She is seeking someone to blame. She has fabricated a connection between two unrelated deaths in order to advance a legal claim. She wants the Chancery case reopened. She wants money. This is not about justice. This is about desperation. Miss Collier described my symptoms before I told her what they were, Griffin said. She identified the pattern before I knew there was a pattern. She has provided medical records that confirm her account. If she is a fraud, Mrs. Wynne, she is the most medically literate fraud in England. Mrs. Wynne's hands tightened into fists. You are defending her. I am following the evidence. The evidence is that she entered your household under a false name, deceived you for 6 months, and is now making wild accusations against a woman who has done nothing but serve Lady Eloise faithfully. The evidence, Griffin said, is that my hands are shaking, that I have been losing feeling in my fingers, that I have been experiencing the same symptoms that killed Baron Collier 2 years ago, and that those symptoms began after you entered this household. Mrs. Wynne stared at him. You believe her. I believe the medical records. I believe the timeline. I believe that Miss Collier recognized something no one else saw. And I believe that if I had continued drinking the wine, I would be dead by spring. Mrs. Wynne turned and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. You are making a mistake, Your Grace. Perhaps. But it is my mistake to make. She left. Griffin stood alone in the drawing room, listening to her footsteps recede down the corridor. The next morning, Lady Eloise Harcourt summoned Seraphine to the library. Eloise stood by the window, arms crossed, her face pale. Is it true? She asked. Is what true, my lady? That your real name is Seraphine Collier, that you entered my household under a false name, that you have been lying to me for 6 months. Seraphine closed the door behind her. Yes. Eloise turned. I trusted you. I brought you into this house. I introduced you to my friends. I confided in you. And you lied. I lied because I had no other choice, Seraphine said. After my father died, I had nothing. No money, no home, a name attached to scandal. I took a position as a companion because it was the only way to survive. I used a false name because no one would hire Baron Collier's daughter. You used me. I worked for you. I served you faithfully for 6 months. I did not use you. Eloise walked forward until she stood directly in front of Seraphine. My aunt says you have accused her of murdering your father. of poisoning the Duke. She says you are seeking money, that you want the Chancery case reopened. I do want the case reopened, or, Seraphine said, because the fraud that destroyed my father's estate is the same fraud your aunt killed to protect. She poisoned my father to stop his testimony. Now she is poisoning the Duke because he has the authority to reopen the case she thought was buried. That is insane. It is the truth. Eloise's voice rose. You have no proof. I have my father's medical records. I have the Duke's medical records. I have correspondence between your aunt and a London solicitor referencing the Collier matter as resolved 1 month before my father died. I have the timeline. I have the symptoms. And I have my own eyes, which watched my father die the same way the Duke is dying now. Eloise stared at her. You truly believe this? I know this. Then you are asking me to believe that the woman who raised me, who cared for me after my mother died, who has been my companion for 10 years, is a murderer. I am telling you what she is, Seraphine said. Whether you believe it is your choice. Eloise turned away. She walked to the window and stood with her back to Seraphine. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. What do you need? Seraphine hesitated. What? You said you have evidence. What else do you need? I need the decanter from your aunt's rooms, unopened. And I need the name of the London apothecary she corresponds with. Eloise was silent for a long moment. Then she said, The decanter will be in your room by this evening. The apothecary's name is Thornton. His shop is on Grace Church Street. Thank you. Eloise did not turn. I am not doing this for you. I am doing this because if what you say is true, she sat at my table. She poured from my decanter. She used my name to enter this house and my affection to stay. And I will not allow that. Seraphine nodded. I understand. I trusted Sophie Marsh for 6 months, Eloise said. I feel betrayed by her. But Seraphine Collier is trying to keep my fiancé alive. I may be angry at both of you, but only one of you matters tonight. Seraphine left the library. As she walked down the corridor, she felt the weight of the last 6 months lift slightly. Not gone, but lighter. That evening, as the sun set behind the chapel, Seraphine sat on the stone bench beneath the wall and watched the shadows lengthen across the garden. She heard footsteps on the gravel path and looked up. Griffin walked toward her, his coat unbuttoned, his cravat loosened. He looked tired. He sat beside her on the bench, too close for propriety. Exactly right for two people sharing a secret that could kill one of them. Lady Eloise provided the decanter, Seraphine said, and the apothecary's name. I know, she told me. She is angry. She has cause to be. Seraphine looked at him. Are you angry? Griffin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You described my tremor before I named it. You described your father's death in clinical detail without flinching. Then you went to the kitchen and served dinner as though nothing had happened. I am not angry. I am humbled. By what? By the fact that you have been carrying this alone for 6 months, watching, waiting, knowing what you knew and having no one believe you. Seraphine looked down at her hands. I have practice. At what? Surviving things I cannot stop. Griffin reached across and took her hand. Not her wrist, her hand. He interlaced his fingers with hers. She gripped hard, harder than she intended, but he did not pull away. I am afraid I am too late again, she said. You are not too late. My father, your father did not have you watching over him the way you have been watching over me. He did not have someone who recognized the pattern. He did not have someone willing to destroy her own disguise to save him. You are not too late, Miss Collier. You are exactly on time. They sat with locked hands until the chapel bell struck 7. Then Griffin stood, helped her to her feet, and walked her back to the house. The night before the confrontation, Griffin sat in his study reading the Ashwick physician's records for the third time. The door opened. Seraphine entered without knocking. She found him standing at the window, holding her father's death certificate. Your father's physician noted progressive extremity numbness over 4 months, Griffin said without turning. Cardiac decline, no further inquiry. He turned. No one looked. She shook her head. No. If I had reviewed the Collier file when I was appointed, you would have found a dead man and a closed case. You did not know. I dismissed you for 2 weeks because of a gray dress, Griffin said. Your father died because no one in his house questioned the obvious. The same failure. Seraphine crossed the room. She stopped in front of him. Then she placed both hands flat against his chest, over his heart, feeling the rhythm beneath wool and linen and skin. Still beating, she said. Because of you. Then stop dismissing me and let me finish. Griffin covered her hands with his. They stood in silence, her palms on his chest, his hands over hers, heartbeat between them. Tomorrow, Griffin said, we go to the chapel. We present the evidence. We name what happened. And whatever comes after, we face it. Together. He confirmed it. Yes. Seraphine closed her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to believe that the silence might finally break. Dawn came cold and clear. The Briarfield Chapel stood at the edge of the estate, stone and simplicity, no stained glass, no ornament. Griffin had chosen it deliberately. No servants, no audience, no performance. A space where testimony was given under oath, where rank dissolved and truth was spoken before God. 5 people gathered in the nave as the sun rose. Griffin, Seraphine, Eloise, Mrs. Dorothea Wynne, and Sir Wycliffe Graves, the magistrate, who had ridden from town at Griffin's request and arrived as the chapel bell struck 6. Griffin stood at the front of the nave. On the altar behind him, he had placed 3 items: the correspondence between Mrs. Wynne and the London solicitor, the Collier Chancery file, and Baron Collier's death certificate. Beside them lay the physician's notes from Ashwick and the notes from his own physician. Mrs. Wynne, Griffin said. In March of 1824, Baron Everard Collier fell ill. Trembling in the hands, numbness in the extremities, progressive pallor. Over 4 months he declined. His physicians called it cardiac failure. His daughter held his hand while he died. Mrs. Wynne sat in the front pew, her face calm. The Baron was a sick man, Your Grace. Everyone knew. In October of 1826, Griffin continued, I began experiencing the same symptoms, trembling after dinner, numbness in my hands, progressive weakness. Miss Collier recognized the pattern because she had watched it kill her father. Dorothea turned to Seraphine. Miss Collier, her name is Sophie Marsh. Seraphine stepped forward. My name is Seraphine Collier. My father was Everard Collier, Baron of Ashwick. You were a guest in our house the winter he died. You sat at his table. You poured his wine. And the symptoms that killed him are the same symptoms I have watched in his grace every evening after you touch his decanter. The chapel was silent. Eloise sat in the second pew, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Sir Wycliffe Graves stood by the door, watching. Dorothea, Eloise said quietly, is this true? Dorothea looked at the door, at the magistrate, at the evidence spread across the altar. She was calculating, Seraphine realized, measuring exits, weighing consequences. The Baron's death was ruled natural, Dorothea said. His physicians examined him. They found no evidence of foul play. His death was ruled natural because no one in that house knew what they were looking at. Seraphine said. Her voice was steady, clear, louder than she had ever allowed it to be in this house. I sat beside my father for 4 months and watched something steal him piece by piece, and I called it God's will because I did not know what else to call it. I know now. It was not God. It was you. This is absurd. You were a guest in our house from February through April of 1824. Seraphine continued. My father fell ill in March. You left in June. He died in July. 1 month after you left, I found a letter from your solicitor in your travel case. It said the Collier matter had been resolved. Resolved. That was the word he used. My father's name beside the word resolved, as though his death were a business transaction. Dorothea stood. You went through my private correspondence. You went through my father's life. Seraphine said. You sat at his table. You smiled at his daughter. You poured his wine, and you killed him to protect 8,000 pounds in fraudulent land transfers that would have been exposed if he had testified. I did no such thing. Griffin stepped forward. The Chancery file confirms the fraud. The land transfers were illegal. Baron Collier was the primary witness. If he had testified, the Wynne estate would have been liable for full restitution. He died before the case went to trial. The case collapsed. 2 years later, I was appointed Chancellor with the authority to reopen dormant cases. If I reviewed the Collier file, the fraud would resurface. You could not allow that. Dorothea turned to Sir Wycliffe. This is speculation. They have no proof. We have the medical records. Griffin said. We have the timeline. We have your correspondence. We have Miss Collier's testimony. And we have this. He lifted the unopened decanter from the altar. Lady Eloise provided this from your rooms. It has not been opened. If it contains what Miss Collier believes it contains, the proof will be conclusive. Dorothea stared at the decanter. The calculation left her face. What remained was exhaustion. You were careful, Seraphine said. You used something slow, something that mimicked natural illness, something that would not be questioned. But you did not account for the one person who had seen it before, who had sat beside it, who had memorized every symptom because she could not save the first man and would not fail to save the second. Dorothea sat down slowly. She looked at Eloise. I did this for you, for your future. The Wynne estate would have been ruined. You would have had nothing. Eloise stood. Your father was weak, she said. He would have destroyed everything to satisfy his conscience. I did what was necessary. My father, Seraphine said, was the strongest man I knew, and you took him because you were afraid of what he would say. That is not strength. That is cowardice. Dorothea said nothing. She walked out of the chapel. Sir Wycliffe followed. The door closed. Eloise sat down heavily in the pew. Griffin turned to Seraphine. You told me the wine was poisoned, he said. I set down the glass and forgot your warning. I did not listen because I heard a servant, not a witness. I dismissed you because of a gray dress. I was wrong. You were wrong, Seraphine said. And my father is still dead. And you are alive because I did not let the same silence kill you. He nodded. No, you did not. Eloise looked up. I need to withdraw from the engagement. Griffin turned. Eloise. I brought her into your house, Eloise said. I vouched for her. I seated her at your table. I cannot marry a man whose household I nearly destroyed. You did not know. I should have known. Eloise stood. Resolve the case. Clear Baron Collier's name. Then we will see what happens after. She walked out of the chapel. Griffin and Seraphine stood alone in the nave, morning light slanting through plain glass. She will not marry you, Seraphine said. he agreed quietly. No, probably not. I am sorry. Griffin looked at her. Are you? Seraphine met his eyes. No, not entirely. Griffin almost smiled. Neither am I. 3 weeks later, Seraphine entered the Duke's study through the front door for the first time. She wore her own traveling dress. Not silk, not the gray wool she had worn for 6 months, but the simple blue muslin her mother had made before the disgrace. She carried a leather case containing her father's legal papers, the chancery documents, the testimony she would give at the inquest. Griffin stood as she entered. Miss Collier? Your Grace. Sir Wycliffe has confirmed the inquest date. Your father's case will be reopened. The land transfers will be examined. The Wynne estate will be held liable. And Mrs. Wynne? Awaiting trial. The decanter contained arsenic. The apothecary on Grace Church Street has confirmed that Mrs. Wynne purchased it under a false name in October. Seraphine set the case on his desk. I need a solicitor. Mine died with my father's reputation. I have retained Mr. Harding. He is expecting you tomorrow. Seraphine looked at him. You retained a solicitor for me before asking my permission. I learned from my mistake, Griffin said. I acted. If you object, you may dismiss him. I do not object. But next time, ask first. Noted. Seraphine turned to leave. Griffin spoke again. Lady Eloise withdrew from the engagement yesterday. Seraphine stopped. I know. She sent me a note. What did it say? That she cannot marry a man whose household she brought a murderer into. That she needs time. That we will see what happens after the case is resolved. And what do you think will happen? Seraphine turned. I think she will marry someone else. Someone who does not remind her of the worst mistake she ever made. And you? I will rebuild my father's estate. Clear his name. Live in the house where he died, and make it a place where he is remembered for what he was, not what they said he was. Griffin nodded slowly. That is a good plan. It is the only plan I have. Then I will not interfere with it. Seraphine left. Griffin stood alone in his study, staring at the leather case on his desk. Inside were the documents that would restore Baron Collier's name and destroy the woman who had killed him. Justice, earned through the courage of a daughter who refused to let silence win twice. He opened the case and began reading. Autumn came to Ashwick with gold light and cold mornings. The Collier estate had been restored, not to its former grandeur, but to order. The fraud had been proven, the land transfers reversed, the debts erased, Baron Collier's name cleared. Seraphine sat at her father's desk, working through correspondence with tenants, surveyors, solicitors. The chancery ruling hung framed on the wall behind her. Collier versus Wynne estate. Fraud proven, restitution ordered. Baron Collier's testimony posthumously entered into record. The door opened. Seraphine looked up. Griffin stood in the doorway, carrying a folio. Your Grace, I was not expecting you. I apologize for arriving unannounced. Griffin crossed the room and set the folio on her desk. Page 14. A boundary dispute in Ashwick Parish. Your northern tenant and the Harcourt estate. Seraphine opened the folio and read. Lord Harcourt's boundary is 12 yards into my tenant's field. This is not a dispute. This is encroachment. I thought you might say that. Seraphine looked up. You came to Ashwick to deliver a boundary dispute. I came to Ashwick because I have not seen you in 3 weeks, and the boundary dispute was a convenient excuse. Seraphine set down the folio. Sit down, Your Grace. This will require maps. Griffin sat. Seraphine opened the estate atlas and spread it across the desk. Their hands met over the parish boundary, his finger tracing the hedge line that marked the Harcourt property, hers correcting the measurement with a notation from the surveyor's report. The hedge was moved in 1820, Seraphine said, after my father's illness began. Lord Harcourt took advantage of the confusion. Then the boundary must be restored. She agreed. Yes. Griffin's finger moved along the hedge line. Seraphine's hand followed, correcting, annotating. Their fingers overlapped on the map. Neither pulled away. Lady Eloise remarried last month, Griffin said. Seraphine looked up. I heard. A naval captain. She sent me a note. She said she wanted someone who looks at her the way I look at chancery files. And how do you look at chancery files? With great attention, Griffin said, but not with love. Seraphine smiled. No, I imagine not. Griffin turned his hand beneath hers, interlacing their fingers over the parish boundary. I look at you differently. How? The way a man looks at the woman who saved his life, who destroyed her own disguise to do it, who refused to let silence win. Seraphine gripped his hand. I did not save your life so you would feel obligated to me. I do not feel obligated. I feel... Griffin paused. Alive. In a way I was not before you whispered in my ear and told me the wine was poisoned. That was a very strange beginning. Yes, but I would not change it. Seraphine looked at their joined hands on the map. The parish boundary ran between them, a line drawn in ink that had once divided her father's land from the Harcourt estate. Now it was just a line, and their hands were on the same side of it. Stay for dinner, Seraphine said. I was hoping you would ask. They sat together in the autumn light. Maps spread between them, the boundary dispute forgotten, the morning stretching into afternoon. Outside, the Ashwick fields turned gold. Inside, the daughter of a murdered baron and the duke who had learned to listen built something new from the wreckage of what had been lost. And for the first time in 2 years, Seraphine Collier allowed herself to believe that the silence was finally, truly broken.